Hey everybody, it's MotherGoose27 and welcome back to my channel. Today we have another Warhammer video. I'm super excited to talk about it, so let's just get started. Today I'm talking about the Kurgan. Out of all the races I've talked about so far, I feel like the Kurgan have the greatest chance of being in the game based on lore. There's a ton of lore on the Kurgan, at least a ton compared to the Snakemen, and so much compared to the Fishmen. But on the other hand, they are another human faction, they're another chaos faction, which I feel like puts them further down on the list of potential races as well. But they are a race that I really would like to see. So, I want to start by clearing up some misconceptions about the Kurgan. A lot of people envision the Kurgan as fantasy Huns. And I definitely understand why people view them that way, but in all actuality, they're more like barbarians. They're just like Norska, really. And it's kind of disappointing, but I think if they were to add them into Total War Warhammer 3, they could update them and actually make them fantasy Huns. Separate their aesthetic a little bit from the Norskins. I think they would have to, but I want to see a fantasy Hun faction, and that's exactly what the Kurgan should be. I think we will for sure see the Kurgan in the game in some faction. Most likely, they will be an unplayable faction that Cathay and Kislev have to deal with, at least in the start. More factions will have to deal with them as they add them into the game. But I think unplayable faction, they just use Norskin models. They have the Kurgan or Hung or Tong or Dolgan or Kul, whatever tribe is specifically in that area, they will have that name, but they will just be Norskin models. Or alternatively, they will be kind of split, and when Norska gets their update, they will get some Kurgan units. When the Warriors of Chaos get their update, they will get some Kurgan units. And the reason I'm having them split and not just one is because, for example, the Kul, their leader, Vardek Kom the Conqueror, is a herald of Archaon. On the other hand, there are factions like the Iron Wolves, who are literally descendants of a group of Norskins and a group of Kurgans who formed one tribe. So, we could see both Norskin and Warriors of Chaos getting some Kurgan units, or potentially just one. I think most likely if just one of them were going to get Kurgan units, it would definitely be Warriors of Chaos, but who knows, maybe it's Norska. Or potentially we could see them as mercenaries. They, from what I've read, they don't really operate as mercenaries, but they could. I don't know. If there's something in the lore that says they are, let me know. Or we could potentially see them as Dogs of War units, potentially, if Dogs of War even are in the game. But those are the ways I see are actually more likely for them to be in the game. But let's take a look at them actually as a faction, if they were in the game. I want to talk about how I would like to see them in the game. I think they would work best as I think the best way to describe it would be Horde Britannia. They are a heavily cavalry-focused faction that also works as a horde. I should have brought the exact quote. I'm sorry, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they are one of the largest human factions. There are thousands of them. Thousands that spread across the eastern steppes. There is a lot of them. And so I think they would work best as a cavalry horde faction. That's what I envision. That's what I would really like to see. But let me know in the comments, how do you think they would operate best? Now let's talk about the eastern steppes a little bit, because I don't know about you guys, but before I actually did research for this video, I always envisioned the eastern steppes as this like desert, not quite chaos wastes, but not quite Cathay area. When actually researching it, it is a huge grassland, which is crazy, and I love it. I would love as part of the section to just be this huge grassland that goes on for thousands of miles. And that really adds to the fact that the Kurgan are nomadic tribes. They have their family, they have their tribes, and they're just traveling all across the eastern steppes. So in terms of the actual campaign map, I think it'd be really interesting if they really played into that, and the eastern steppes would have very little or no actual settlements in it. It would make it very hard for enemy players to actually go through and conquer those lands, but they're nomadic tribes. They never stay in one place. I think it would be weird if there was just settlements everywhere. I don't know. What do you guys think? So let me know in the comments below. Here's what I really want to talk about. While Kurgans, I think, could stand alone as their own faction, I think the best choice would be to combine all of the Tribes of Chaos and then give us a Tribes of Chaos faction. This would be the Kurgans, which have a lot of different tribes within them. For example, the Kulls, the Dolgans, the Iron Wolves. I've mentioned those all before, but there's several other tribes as well. And then let's just get them out of the way. Technically, Norska would be a Tribe of Chaos, but they're their own faction. Throw those out of there. We don't need them. And then the Swords of Chaos, which are the Warriors of Chaos. Throw those out. They're their own faction. But there are other tribes that aren't technically Kurgan. For example, the Hung, the Tong, and the Skarmor. Each of those are their own unique faction. The Hung, for example, I thought the Hung were just in the northern part of Nagaroth, but no, the Hung are in the eastern steppes as well. So it fits well to me. We already have so many separate tribes of Kurgan. There's not a lot of lore. There's not a lot of diversity within the units that we actually know about. Yes, there's some named characters. Yes, we have an idea of what the actual units look like. For example, as I mentioned before, they're a barbarian cavalry race, really. And they're very melee focused. So my whole point to this is there's not a lot of variety. And so I think instead of having the Kurgan and their 8 to 10 tribes, and then having the Hung, and then having the Tong, and then having the Skarmor, let's just combine them all and have one faction called the Tribes of Chaos. Now, within the Tribes of Chaos, the Hung would still be its own sub-faction. The Kurgan could be its own sub-faction broken up into all of its specific tribes. The Skarmor could be its own sub-faction. The Tong could be its own sub-faction. But we could actually get to see these factions flushed out, even if not all of them have named characters. I kind of view them as the human equivalent to the Skaven. There's a ton of warring tribes. They're constantly fighting each other. They have thousands, if not millions, of warriors. Their numbers are so vast. And if they united, they could do some serious damage. Now, obviously not on the level of the Skaven, but something similar. So, I don't know. I just think they work better as the Tribes of Chaos. They could even just be called the Kurgan and just throw the Hung, the Tong, and the Skarmor in there. But technically, those three aren't Kurgan. So, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to start talking about some lore bits here and some potential legendary lords. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is the Great Kurgan. The Great Kurgan was the only man who was able to unite all of the Kurgan tribes. They had a mighty empire. They caused so much death and destruction. Now, very quickly, I'm going to just skim over his lore. He made a deal with the Chaos Gods. They gave him great power. He had a lot of wives, but he had 4 sons. The Chaos Gods basically took his 4 sons as a sacrifice, as a payment for his great glory. He was left without an heir. The Chaos Gods then got bored and abandoned him, and his kingdom slowly fell apart. He died. All the Kurgan tribes split again. Now, I'm not sure about all of the Kurgan tribes, but I know most of, if not all of them, reunited, obviously, to serve Archaon during the end time. So, the Great Kurgan's not necessarily the only one, but the only one before Archaon. So, I think what would make a really great campaign mechanic, or a campaign victory condition, would be to become the Great Kurgan. To unite all of the Kurgan tribes, or all the Tribes of Chaos, and then lead a campaign out, conquering the rest of the world. I don't know. I think that would be really interesting. It would be something for the player to aim to. Now, obviously, in a lot of playthroughs, you can force other factions to confederate with you, or you can destroy them. I think it would be a really interesting mechanic if, instead of destroying the actual Kurgan tribes, you got bonuses for potentially uniting them. I don't know. I think that'd be interesting. Let me know in the comments. Now, I want to talk about 2 potential legendary lord options that we have. There are others. If you would like me to talk about others, let me know. I definitely will. But the first one I want to talk about comes from the Cull. This is Vardek Krom the Conqueror. Now, he does end up becoming a Herald of Archaeon. His faction joins the Warriors of Chaos during the end times. But as we know, from what it sounds like, it's not going to be the end times. It's just taking place around the time when Karl Franz became emperor. So you could have Vardek still lead the Cull, still lead the Kurgan as a separate faction from the Warriors of Chaos. The second legendary lord I want to talk about doesn't have a name as far as I know, but she is the Gypsy Queen of the Dolgans. Now, the Dolgans specifically have beef not only with Kislev, but with the Northern Tribesmen, so the Warriors of Chaos, the Norskins, and really all the other tribes of Chaos they have beef with. But they're right in that area to where the Dolgans could have a serious rivalry with Kislev. Now, there's not a lot of other potential legendary lords, but there are some. For example, there is Akarik, the Conqueror of the Nine Wastes. He also comes from the Cull. Tamerkan, which is a servant of Nurgle. Potentially, you could even see him as a legendary lord or a hero for Nurgle's army. Potentially. There's Surtha Lank, which I definitely pronounced incorrectly. They're a great warlord who serves Tzeentch. They led a pretty serious invasion of Kislev, and they fought with Archaeon. So, again, we could potentially have them, if we don't get the Kurgans, either with Tzeentch or with the Warriors of Chaos. We'll just have to see. But yes, so there are some options, but like I've said, they could be split amongst other Chaos factions if they're not their own faction. But I think it would be really great, even if we just got a couple of units, just like the Snakemen, just like the Fishmen. Even if we got a couple units in other factions, it would be enough for modders to make their own factions. But lastly, I want to talk about their monsters. What we know about the Kurgan is they were actually the first to tame and use the mammoths as mounts. And of course, we've already got that in Norska, but I would totally be okay having another faction that used mammoths. That's the only monster that I could find that I know they use for sure, but something I think they could use would be the Ogre Kingdom's Saber Tusks. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Saber Husks, it seems like the Ogre Kingdom, they don't use them as mounts. They use them like for example, the Norskins use their wolves, which would basically make them a fast-moving artillery or missile hunting unit. Now, obviously, leave them like that for the Ogre Kingdoms. They're not mounts, they're just a pack of animals sent to hunt things like artillery, missiles, and maybe intercept cavalry, stuff like that. But on the other hand, saying the Kurgan are much smaller, why not make them mounts? Saying they would be a cavalry faction, give them a little variety in the mounts they have, and that way it's not just horses. I know this was a very basic look at the Kurgan, but I just wanted you guys to have a basic idea on their lore, who they are, who are some potential characters, where they live, stuff like that. If you guys want a more in-depth look, there's links to all of the things I'm referencing today in the description below, just like always. Or if you want a more in-depth look where I just actually sit and go through the lore, I could definitely do that. Let me know in the comments, because they're actually, unlike the other two factions where I literally told you everything we know, the Kurgan actually have a surprising amount of lore. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I know this was just a very basic look, but I just wanted this to kind of be like an introductory video to the Kurgan and what they could potentially look like. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of the love and support my Warhammer videos have been getting, so thank you guys. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to join the flock. I also want to plug my Discord. It's in the link in the description below. You guys should totally go check it out. We have great conversations. There's a place where you guys can leave video suggestions, stuff like that, and it's the main way to connect with me as a creator. So yeah, that and all my other social media is linked in the description below. And I will see you in the next one. Mother Goose out.